Marcus Thompson was a man who had achieved more in his 35 years than most people could dream of accomplishing in a lifetime. He was the founder and CEO of Novatech Innovations, a cutting-edge technology company that had grown from a small startup in his garage to a global powerhouse. Marcus wasn't your typical CEO, though. He didn't wear expensive suits or drive flashy cars. Instead, he preferred simple clothes, a humble demeanor, and an unrelenting focus on making a difference through innovation. His employees often described him as approachable, kind, and deeply passionate about his work. On this particular morning, Marcus decided to do something he hadn't done in years. He would visit his company's headquarters without announcing it beforehand. For months, he'd been buried under piles of reports, meetings, and strategic planning sessions. Though he loved his job, he missed connecting with the people who made Novatech what it was, the hardworking individuals at every level of the organization. He wanted to see how things were running on the ground, to feel the pulse of the workplace again. So after grabbing a cup of coffee from his favorite cafe, Marcus hopped into his modest sedan and drove to the office. When he arrived, Marcus took a moment to look up at the towering glass building that housed Novatech's headquarters. It was a symbol of everything he had built over the past decade, a testament to late nights, tough decisions, and countless sacrifices. But today he wasn't here as Marcus Thompson, CEO. Today, he was just another visitor walking through the doors. Dressed casually in a paramour, Marcus stepped outside the building, his mind racing with thoughts. The cool breeze brushed against his face as he stood on the sidewalk, replaying the interaction with the receptionist in his head. He wasn't angry, at least, not entirely. What bothered him more than anything was how casually the situation had unfolded. It wasn't just about being mistaken for someone else. It was the underlying assumption that someone who looked like him didn't belong in a place like Novatech. Marcus had faced similar moments before, but they always stung a little deeper when they happened within the walls of his own company. He walked across the street and sat down on a bench, pulling out his phone to check some emails. As he scrolled, through updates from his executive team, something caught his attention. There were reports of rising employee dissatisfaction, complaints about unfair treatment, and even rumors of discriminatory behavior among certain managers. At first glance, these issues seemed isolated, but as Marcus read further, he began to notice patterns. Employees from diverse backgrounds felt overlooked or undervalued. Promotions were going disproportionately to people who fit a specific mold, often those who came from similar backgrounds or shared certain characteristics with senior leadership. Marcus leaned back on the bench, letting out a deep sigh. He had poured his heart and soul into creating a company culture built on inclusivity and respect. When he first started Novatech, he dreamed of a workplace where talent and hard work mattered more than appearances or connections. But somewhere, along the way, cracks had formed. The values he worked so hard to instill were eroding, replaced by biases and assumptions that crept in unnoticed. And now, standing outside his own building, Marcus realized that the incident with the receptionist wasn't an anomaly, it was a symptom of a much larger problem. As he thought more about it, Marcus couldn't help but reflect on his own journey. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, he'd faced countless obstacles. People doubted him because of where he came from, what he looked like, and the color of his skin. Yet he refused to let those doubts define him. Instead, he used them as fuel to push harder, to prove that success wasn't reserved for a select few. That same determination had driven him to build Nova Technologies from scratch, turning it into one of the most innovative companies in its field. But now sitting here, Marcus wondered if he had become complacent. Had he allowed the very barriers he fought against to take root in his own organization? The weight of responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders. Marcus knew he couldn't ignore what he'd discovered. Pretending everything was fine wouldn't fix the growing divide within Novatech. Something needed to change, and not just superficially. This wasn't about firing one receptionist or issuing a public apology. It was about addressing the systemic issues that had taken hold over time. If he wanted to honor the vision he'd set out with when he founded the company, he would have to make bold, perhaps even painful decisions. An idea began to form in Marcus's mind. What if Novatech didn't just need a few adjustments? What if it needed a complete overhaul, a dismantling of the old structures and a rebuilding of something stronger, fairer, and more aligned with its original mission? The thought both excited and terrified him. Dismantling parts of the company could mean losing key players, disrupting operations, and risking financial stability. But Marcus also knew that true progress rarely came without sacrifice. Sometimes you had to tear things down to build them back better. By the time he stood up from the bench, Marcus had made up his mind. He wouldn't go back into the building as the same leader he was before. This wasn't just about fixing a broken system. It was about setting an example for his employees, for the industry, and for anyone who believed in the power of change. With renewed determination, Marcus called his assistant and requested an emergency meeting with his top executives. Then he sent a text to his legal team, asking them to prepare documents for immediate action. Whatever happened next, Marcus was ready to face it head-on. As he crossed the street and re-entered the building through a private entrance, Marcus felt a mix of emotions swirling inside him: anger, sadness, hope, and resolve. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Some people might misunderstand his actions, while others might resist the changes he planned to implement. But Marcus reminded himself why he started Novatech in the first place: to create a better future, one where everyone had a fair shot at success. And if that meant dismantling the empire he had built, so be it. After all, sometimes the hardest choices lead to the greatest transformations. The boardroom at Novatech headquarters was a sleek, modern space designed to inspire confidence and authority. The long glass table gleamed under the soft glow of recessed lighting, while floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. It was here that Marcus Thompson gathered his senior leadership team for what would become one of the most pivotal meetings in the company's history. As he walked into the room, dressed in the same casual attire from earlier, there were murmurs among the executives. Some exchanged puzzled glances, others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. No one had expected this impromptu meeting, and Marcus's uncharacteristic appearance only added to the tension. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Marcus began, taking a seat at the head of the table. His tone was calm, but firm, commanding attention without raising his voice. "I know this is unusual, but we need to address some critical issues today, issues that can no longer wait." The room fell silent as Marcus opened his laptop and projected a series of documents onto the screen behind him. Charts, graphs, and employee feedback reports filled the display, each one highlighting areas where the company was falling short. Morale was low, turnover rates were climbing, and complaints about discriminatory practices were increasing. These weren't isolated incidents. They painted a troubling picture of a company losing its way. "I've spent years building Novatech, with a clear vision," Marcus continued, his gaze steady as it moved across the room. "A vision rooted in innovation, inclusivity, and fairness. But somewhere along the line, we lost sight of those values. Today, I'm announcing a major restructuring plan. Effective immediately, certain departments will be dissolved, contracts terminated, and operations paused until further notice." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Chairs scraped against the floor as executives leaned forward, their faces registering shock, disbelief, and anger. One of the vice presidents, a man named Greg who had been with the company since its early days, slammed his hand on the table. "Marcus, you can't be serious. This will devastate our bottom line. We'll lose clients, investors, everything." Another executive chimed in, her voice rising with panic. "What about the employees? You're talking about firing hundreds of people. Do you have any idea how much damage this will cause?" Marcus listened patiently, letting them vent their frustrations. When the room finally quieted, he spoke again, his voice unwavering. "Yes, these decisions will come with consequences, but let me ask you something. What's the cost of doing nothing? If we continue down this path, ignoring the cracks in our foundation, Novatech won't just fail financially, it will fail morally. And that's not something I'm willing to accept." He went on to explain the specifics of the restructuring plan. Departments responsible for perpetuating toxic behaviors, such as parts of HR, marketing, and middle management, would be shut down temporarily. Key leaders implicated in fostering divisive cultures would be asked to step aside. Contracts with vendors known for unethical practices would also be terminated. In their place, Marcus envisioned rebuilding teams with individuals committed to equity, transparency, and accountability. This isn't about punishment, Marcus emphasized, addressing the skepticism in the room. It's about creating a healthier, more sustainable future for Novatech. Yes, it will require sacrifice from all of us, but if we truly believe in the mission of this company, then we owe it to ourselves and to our employees to make these changes. Despite his assurances, the resistance didn't fade completely. Some executives argued that the timing was wrong, citing upcoming product launches and investor meetings. Others worried about public perception, fearing backlash from shareholders and media outlets. Marcus acknowledged their concerns but remained resolute. He reminded everyone that leadership wasn't about avoiding risks. It was about making tough choices for the greater good. As the meeting drew to a close, Marcus handed out detailed action plans to each executive, outlining their roles in implementing the restructuring process. "We'll face challenges ahead," he said, standing up to signal the end of the session. "But remember why we're doing this. Novatech has always been about breaking barriers and setting new standards. Let's prove that we're still capable of living up to that promise." When the executives filed out of the room, many looked shaken, unsure of what lay ahead. But Marcus felt a sense of clarity wash over him. For the first time in months, he felt aligned with the core principles that had driven him to start Novatech in the first place. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but he knew the first step was often the hardest, and he had taken it. Later that afternoon, news of the restructuring began to spread throughout the company. Employees gathered in hushed conversations, speculating about what it meant for their jobs and the future of the organization. Rumors swirled and anxiety levels rose. Yet, amidst the uncertainty, there was also a glimmer of hope. Some employees saw this as an opportunity, a chance for Novatech to right its wrongs and emerge stronger than ever. For Claire, the receptionist, whose actions had unknowingly sparked this chain of events, the day took a dramatic turn. She received an email informing her that her position had been eliminated as part of the restructuring. At first, she felt blindsided, struggling to process what had happened. Hadn't she simply been doing her job? Why was she being singled out? Over the next few weeks, Claire found herself grappling with mixed emotions. On one hand, she was angry and frustrated, feeling like she'd been unfairly targeted. On the other hand, she couldn't shake the memory of the man she'd turned away that morning. The man who, as she later learned, was none other than Marcus Thompson himself. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Her snap judgment based on appearances hadn't just embarrassed her, it had highlighted a flaw in her own thinking. Determined to understand where she'd gone wrong, Claire began reflecting on her behavior. She thought back to the dismissive tone she'd used, the assumptions she'd made without giving Marcus a chance to explain. Slowly, she started to see how her actions fit into a larger pattern, one that Marcus was now working tirelessly to dismantle. It wasn't easy to confront her mistakes, but Claire realized that growth often came from discomfort. Meanwhile, Marcus threw himself into overseeing the restructuring efforts. Days turned into weeks as he worked alongside consultants, legal advisors, and newly appointed leaders to rebuild Novatech from the ground up. The process was grueling, requiring long hours and difficult conversations. But Marcus never lost sight of the bigger picture. Every decision, every policy change was guided by the belief that Novatech could and should be better. By the time the dust began to settle, the company bore little resemblance to its former self. Gone were the outdated hierarchies and exclusionary practices that had once defined it. In their place stood a leaner, more agile organization focused on collaboration, empathy, and innovation. Employees who had once felt marginalized now found themselves valued contributors, their voices heard and respected. And though the journey was far from over, Marcus knew they were heading in the right direction. For the first time in a long time, He felt proud, not just of what Novatech had achieved, but of the example it was setting for others. Sometimes tearing things down was the only way to build something truly extraordinary. The weeks following the announcement of Novatech's restructuring were nothing short of chaotic. The company's headquarters buzzed with a mix of emotions: fear, confusion, anger, and even hope. Employees gathered in small groups, whispering about who had been let go and what this meant for their own futures. Some packed up their desks quietly, while others vented their frustrations in heated conversations near the water cooler. For many, it felt like the ground beneath them was shifting, and no one knew exactly where they stood. Marcus Thompson, however, remained steadfast. He spent long hours meeting with department heads, reviewing plans, and addressing concerns from employees at every level. His days began early and often stretched late into the night, fueled by endless cups of black coffee and an unshakable determination to see this transformation through. Despite the weight of the decisions he'd made, Marcus carried himself with a quiet confidence that reassured those around him. People began to notice how deeply invested he was, not just in the success of the company, but in the well-being of its people. One of the first steps Marcus took was ensuring that those affected by the layoffs were treated with dignity and respect. Each employee whose contract was terminated received a generous severance package, along with access to career counseling services and job placement assistance. Marcus insisted on these measures, believing it was the least the company could do for individuals who had contributed to its growth. "We're not just cutting ties," he told his team during one strategy session. "We're helping people transition into new opportunities. That's part of taking responsibility for our actions." As word spread about the support being offered, some of the initial resentment among former employees softened. While losing a job was never easy, many appreciated the effort Novatech was making to ease the burden. Social media posts from former staff members began popping up online, sharing stories of gratitude for the resources provided and expressing hope for the future. These positive reflections helped counterbalance the negative headlines circulating in the press. Meanwhile, Marcus turned his attention to rebuilding the company's workforce. He opened applications for positions across all levels, emphasizing diversity and inclusion as core criteria for hiring. Job postings explicitly stated that Novatech welcomed candidates from underrepresented communities and encouraged anyone with innovative ideas to apply. To ensure fairness, Marcus implemented blind recruitment processes, removing identifying information such as names, photos, and addresses from resumes before they reached hiring managers. This approach aimed to eliminate unconscious biases and give everyone an equal chance to succeed. Claire, the receptionist whose encounter with Marcus had unknowingly set this chain of events in motion, found herself grappling with her new reality. After receiving her termination letter, she initially felt bitter and resentful. Losing her job wasn't easy, especially when it happened so suddenly. But as days passed, Claire couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that she bore some responsibility for what had transpired. She replayed the interaction in her mind over and over again, cringing at how dismissive she had been. Determined to make amends, Claire decided to write a letter to Marcus. Sitting at her kitchen table one evening, she poured her heart onto the page. She apologized sincerely for her behavior, acknowledging that her assumptions about him were wrong and admitting that she had judged him unfairly based on appearances. She expressed regret for contributing to the very culture of bias that Marcus was now working to dismantle. Finally, she thanked him for the lessons she had learned, even if they came at a personal cost. When Marcus received Claire's letter, he read it several times, reflecting on her words. He appreciated her honesty and vulnerability, recognizing that admitting fault was never easy. Rather than dismissing her apology outright, Marcus saw an opportunity. He believed in second chances, especially for those willing to learn and grow. So he invited Claire to interview for a newly created role within Novatech, Customer Relations and Inclusivity Training Coordinator. It was a position designed to foster better communication and understanding between employees and clients, aligning perfectly with the values Marcus hoped to instill in the revamped company. Claire hesitated when she received the invitation. Part of her worried it might be awkward or uncomfortable to return to the same company where she had made such a glaring mistake. But another part of her recognized the significance of the offer. This wasn't just a job. It was a chance to rebuild trust, both with herself and with others. With a deep breath, she accepted the interview. During their conversation, Marcus asked Claire thoughtful questions about her experiences since leaving Novatech and how she envisioned contributing to the company's renewed mission. He listened intently as she spoke candidly about her journey of self-reflection and her desire to help create a more inclusive environment. By the end of the interview, Marcus felt confident that Claire had the potential to thrive in the role. Her willingness to confront her mistakes and commit to personal growth impressed him deeply. When Claire was offered the position, she accepted with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Returning to Novatech was daunting, but she was determined to prove herself, not just to Marcus, but to the entire organization. On her first day back, Claire walked into the building with a newfound sense of purpose. Gone was the casual dismissiveness she once displayed. Instead, she approached her work with humility, empathy, and a genuine desire to make a difference. In her new role, Claire collaborated closely with Marcus and other leaders to develop training programs focused on inclusivity and bias awareness. Together, they crafted workshops and seminars designed to educate employees about the importance of treating everyone with respect and fairness. Claire shared her own story during these sessions, using her experience as a teaching moment. Her openness resonated with participants, inspiring them to examine their own behaviors and attitudes. Over time, the changes at Novatech began to take root. Employees noticed a shift in the workplace culture, a greater emphasis on listening, collaboration, and mutual respect. Teams became more cohesive, projects more innovative, and morale steadily improved. Clients and partners also took note of the company's renewed commitment to ethical practices, strengthening Novatech's reputation in the industry. For Marcus, watching these transformations unfold was incredibly rewarding. He knew the road ahead would still have challenges, but seeing the progress gave him hope. The decision to dismantle parts of the company had been painful, but it had paved the way for something far stronger and more meaningful. Novatech was no longer just a tech giant. It was a beacon of change, proving that even the most entrenched systems could evolve when guided by courage and conviction. And as Claire settled into her new role, she realized she wasn't just rebuilding her career, she was rebuilding herself. Her journey from judgment to understanding mirrored the broader transformation happening within Novatech. Together, they were creating a legacy rooted in accountability, compassion, and the belief that everyone deserved a fair shot at success. Months turned into a year, and Novatech began to emerge as a completely different entity. The once rigid and hierarchical structure had given way to a more fluid, inclusive, and innovative organization. Employees who had previously felt invisible or undervalued now walked through the halls with renewed confidence. Teams collaborated seamlessly, ideas flowed freely, and creativity thrived in ways that hadn't been possible before. It was clear that Marcus Thompson's bold decision to dismantle and rebuild the company wasn't just a risky gamble. It was a transformative success. Claire, now firmly established in her role as the Customer Relations and Inclusivity Training Coordinator, became one of the most respected figures within Novatech. Her journey from being part of the problem to becoming an integral part of the solution inspired many. She worked tirelessly alongside Marcus and other leaders to implement programs aimed at fostering empathy, understanding, and accountability across all levels of the organization. Her workshops were particularly impactful because she didn't shy away from sharing her own story. During one session, Claire stood in front of a room filled with employees, some new hires, others longtime staff members, and recounted the day she mistook Marcus for someone who didn't belong in the building. "I judged him based on what he wore, not who he was," she admitted, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "That moment taught me how easy it is to fall into patterns of bias, even when we think we're doing our jobs fairly. But it also showed me that growth starts with acknowledging our mistakes and committing to do better." Her words resonated deeply with the audience. Many nodded in agreement, while others scribbled notes or raised questions about how they could apply these lessons in their daily interactions. The feedback from these sessions was overwhelmingly positive, with participants praising Claire's honesty and the practical tools she provided to recognize and address biases. Over time, these training programs became a cornerstone of Novatech's culture, helping to solidify its reputation as a leader in workplace inclusivity. As the company continued to evolve, so did its impact on the industry. News outlets began covering Novatech's remarkable turnaround, highlighting the bold steps Marcus had taken to confront systemic issues head-on. Business analysts called it one of the most daring corporate reinventions in modern history. Articles praised Marcus for his willingness to prioritize values over profits, proving that ethical leadership could drive both financial success and social progress. Competitors started taking notice too, with some attempting to replicate Novatech's approach to diversity and inclusion, though few achieved the same level of authenticity. Clients and partners also responded positively to the changes. Companies seeking tech solutions increasingly looked to Novatech, not only for its cutting-edge products, but also for its commitment to fairness and innovation. One major client, a global retail chain, went so far as to publicly commend Novatech for setting a new standard in corporate responsibility. "They've shown us that businesses can be forces for good without compromising excellence," the CEO of the retail chain said during a joint press conference. Such endorsements further bolstered Novatech's standing in the market, leading to record-breaking profits despite the initial disruptions caused by the restructuring. For Marcus, the transformation of Novatech was more than just a professional victory, it was deeply personal. He often reflected on the early days of the company, when it was little more than a dream scribbled on napkins and fueled by late-night coding marathons. Back then, he had envisioned Novatech as a place where anyone could succeed regardless of background or circumstance. Seeing that vision come alive again, stronger and more resilient than ever, filled him with immense pride. Yet he remained humble, always quick to credit the collective efforts of his team for the company's resurgence. One afternoon, Marcus invited Claire to join him for coffee at a small cafe near the office. It was rare for him to take breaks during the workday, but he wanted to check in with her personally. As they sat sipping their drinks, Marcus asked how she was adjusting to her new responsibilities. Claire smiled, visibly touched by his concern. "To be honest, I never imagined I'd end up here after everything that happened," she confessed. "But this role has given me a chance to make things right, not just for myself, but for everyone around me." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "You've done incredible work, Claire. You've shown people that change is possible even when it feels impossible. That takes courage." Claire hesitated for a moment before responding. "Thank you for believing in me, Marcus. Not many people would have given me another shot after what I did. But you saw something in me that I didn't see in myself." "That's what leadership is about," Marcus replied with a warm smile. "It's not about perfection. It's about potential. Everyone deserves a chance to grow, including you." Their conversation shifted to broader topics, including plans for Novatech's future. Marcus shared his vision of expanding the company's gay outreach initiatives, partnering with schools and community organizations to provide opportunities for underrepresented groups in tech. Claire listened intently, offering suggestions and insights based on her experiences. By the time they left the cafe, both felt energized and aligned in their shared mission to continue pushing boundaries. Back at the office, the ripple effects of Novatech's cultural shift extended beyond its walls. Employees who had participated in the inclusivity training began applying those principles in their personal lives, sparking conversations with friends and family about bias and fairness. Some even volunteered with local nonprofits using their skills to support causes aligned with Novatech's values. This outward-facing momentum reinforced the idea that meaningful change doesn't stop at the office door. It spreads, influencing communities and industries far beyond its origin. Even former employees who had been laid off during the restructuring found themselves benefiting indirectly from Novatech's transformation. Thanks to the career counseling services and job placement assistance provided by the company, many secured positions at other firms, bringing with them the lessons they'd learned about equity and inclusion. Several returned to thank Marcus and his team, expressing gratitude for the support they received during a challenging time. These reunions served as poignant reminders of the lasting impact Novatech's actions had on people's lives. By the end of the year, Novatech hosted a gala to celebrate its achievements and honor the individuals who had contributed to its rebirth. The event brought together employees, clients, partners, and community leaders under one roof, creating an atmosphere of unity and celebration. During his speech, Marcus took the stage to thunderous applause. He thanked everyone for their hard work and dedication, emphasizing that the real heroes of this story were the people who embraced change and helped bring it to life. We didn't just rebuild a company. We redefined what it means to lead. With integrity, Marcus declared, his voice ringing with conviction. And while there's still much work to be done, I believe we've proven that no challenge is too great when we face it together. As the crowd erupted into cheers, Claire watched from the sidelines, tears welling up in her eyes. She thought back to the day she had dismissed Marcus so callously, unable to reconcile that version of herself with the person she had become. In that moment, she realized how far she and Novatech had come. What started as a single misstep had blossomed into a journey of redemption, renewal, and hope. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly present new challenges, Claire knew they were ready to meet them head-on, united by a shared commitment to creating a brighter future. For themselves, for Novatech, and for the world. Years had passed since Marcus Thompson made the bold decision to dismantle and rebuild Novatech from the ground up. What began as a moment of personal reflection outside the company's headquarters had grown into a movement that reshaped not only Novatech but also the broader business landscape. The story of how a single interaction with a receptionist sparked a revolution in corporate culture became legendary, inspiring countless organizations and individuals around the world. Novatech was no longer just a tech company. It was a symbol of resilience, accountability, and transformation. Under Marcus's leadership, the organization continued to innovate while staying true to its core values of inclusivity, equity, and fairness. Its products were cutting edge, but what truly set Novatech apart was its unwavering commitment to doing good. Clients trusted the company not just for its expertise but also for its integrity. Employees took pride in working for an organization that prioritized people over profits, a rare quality in today's competitive marketplace. Claire's journey within Novatech mirrored the company's evolution. From her humble beginnings as a receptionist who made a costly mistake to becoming one of the most influential voices in shaping its inclusive culture, she embodied the power of growth and redemption. Her role as head of diversity and inclusion allowed her to create programs and initiatives that reached far beyond the walls of Novatech. Schools, nonprofits, and even rival companies sought her advice on fostering more equitable environments. Claire often joked that if someone had told her years ago she'd be leading such efforts, she wouldn't have believed them. Yet here she was, proof that second chances could lead to extraordinary outcomes. The bond between Marcus and Claire grew stronger over time, built on mutual respect and shared purpose. They frequently collaborated on projects, co-authoring articles and speaking at conferences about their experiences. Their partnership became a testament to the idea that meaningful change often requires unlikely alliances. Together, they penned a book titled From Judgment to Justice, a journey of redemption and renewal. It detailed their individual stories, from Marcus's early struggles as a Black entrepreneur facing systemic barriers, to Claire's awakening to her own biases, and how those paths intersected to transform an entire company. The book became an instant bestseller, praised for its honesty, vulnerability, and actionable insights. Readers from all walks of life found inspiration in its pages. Business leaders adopted its principles to improve workplace cultures. Educators used it as a teaching tool to discuss bias and inclusion, and everyday readers saw themselves in Claire and Marcus's journeys. The book's success wasn't just measured in sales. It was reflected in the conversations it sparked and the actions it inspired. People began to recognize that real change started with self-awareness and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. As Novatech flourished, so did its impact on society. The company launched several outreach programs aimed at closing the gap in access to technology and education. One initiative, called Novatech Futures, partnered with underprivileged schools to provide students with coding workshops, mentorship opportunities, and scholarships. Another program, Innovation Without Borders, supported startups, founded by women and minorities, offering funding, resources, and guidance to help them succeed. These efforts weren't just charitable endeavors. They were strategic investments in creating a more diverse and innovative future. Marcus often said that Novatech's greatest achievement wasn't its financial success or technological breakthroughs. It was the lives it touched along the way. Former employees who had been part of the restructuring process credited the company for helping them transition into fulfilling careers. Community members expressed gratitude for the opportunities Novatech provided through its outreach programs. Even competitors acknowledged the positive influence Novatech had on the industry, adopting similar practices to foster inclusivity and fairness. Despite his many accomplishments, Marcus remained grounded. He never sought the spotlight or craved recognition for his work. Instead, he focused on leaving a lasting legacy, one rooted in service, humility, and compassion. In interviews, he often emphasized that leadership wasn't about titles or authority. It was about making decisions that benefited others, even when those decisions were difficult. His philosophy resonated deeply with aspiring entrepreneurs and seasoned executives alike, earning him widespread admiration. For Claire, the culmination of her journey came when she received an award for outstanding leadership in diversity and inclusion. Standing on stage at a prestigious gala, she fought back tears as she accepted the honor. "This isn't just my story. It belongs to everyone who believed in me, challenged me, and stood by me," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. To anyone out there who feels like they've made mistakes too big to overcome, I want you to know this: growth is possible, change is possible, and sometimes the hardest moments in our lives can lead us to our greatest purpose. By the time Marcus announced his retirement, Novatech was thriving like never before. Its workforce was more diverse than ever, its revenue streams robust, and its reputation untouchable. Marcus stepped down knowing he had fulfilled his vision of building a company that prioritized humanity alongside innovation. He handed the reins to a new generation of leaders, individuals who had grown up within Novatech's transformed culture and were committed to carrying its mission forward. In his farewell address, Marcus reflected on the lessons he had learned throughout his career. "Success isn't measured by how much you achieve for yourself," he said. "It's measured by how much you empower others to achieve. If I've done anything right, it's because I surrounded myself with people who reminded me of that truth every day." His words brought the audience to their feet, applause echoing through the room as colleagues, friends, and family celebrated a man whose life was defined by courage and conviction. Even in retirement, Marcus stayed active in mentoring young entrepreneurs and advocating for social justice. He traveled the world, sharing his story and encouraging others to embrace change, however daunting it might seem. Meanwhile, Claire continued to lead Novatech's diversity initiatives, ensuring that the company's values remained at the forefront of everything it did. Together, they proved that progress wasn't a destination, it was a continuous journey. Looking back, the incident with the receptionist seemed almost poetic. What had initially felt like a moment of failure turned out to be the catalyst for something extraordinary. It reminded everyone involved that life's greatest transformations often begin with discomfort. By choosing grace over grievance, Marcus and Claire showed the world that even the smallest acts of courage could ripple outward, creating waves of change that touched countless lives. And so, the legacy of Novatech endured, not as a monument to perfection, but as a celebration of imperfection, growth, and the boundless potential of human connection. Through every challenge and triumph, Marcus and Claire demonstrated that when we dare to confront our flaws and embrace the possibility of reinvention, we unlock the power to build a better future for ourselves, for our communities, and for generations to come.